Hi, Wyn. Thanks for joining us today on our Industry Leader series at Adaptavate. It's great to have you. We'd just like to start off. Maybe you would like to introduce yourself, if you don't mind, and your background.
No problem at all. Thank you, Pete. Thanks for the invitation and really looking forward to the discussion today. As far as I'm concerned, I've been around for over 35 years in business skills and training across a variety of organisations. I started my career in that element with the Training Enterprise Council, so that shows how far back I've been involved in skills, which are a quasi-government body. I then went into the construction industry specifically as the Welsh Director of CITB and CITB Construction Skills when it was an SSC, Sector Skills Council, so I had an insight of the professional elements as well as just the CITB footprint. Then I went into the college in terms of looking at their green, sustainable and renewable strategies, and did that for about 6-7 years and really built that up to a point where the maturity I could move on, and now really trying to retire and play golf. But unfortunately or fortunately, I've been seen as somebody who can add value in terms of green skills and renewables and sustainability. So involved with a number of organisations just delivering those sort of things. So, and this is where the report and the invite to sit on the group regarding the report we're going to talk about later came about. But that's a quick overview.
It's a huge resume of skills that you've kind of gathered up over the years, and I can absolutely see why you've been invited to take part in the report, along with so many others. There's a lot of years of experience, shall we say, involved in this report from different backgrounds. What was that kind of invite process? How did that look?
Yeah, again, governments get hit, don't they, in terms of they're not understanding the issues. The relationship I've had is going back really to CITB days with Welsh Government, especially when it was a devolved establishment in terms of moving skills policy forward. They've been very open to learn. Ministers and civil servants have been very open to engage with industry and haven't seen it as an obstacle. So it's been very fortunate. So we've done things like building companies, building skills. We've done a lot of the optimized retrofit program that you're aware of. And other things have come about because the government and officials have seen they need to know what the industry wants. And I think the other opportunity here is we're into a strategy that is new to everybody. And I think it's not one where government can pick a solution off the hat. Not the Welsh Government used to do that. Right? They were quite innovative. They developed shared apprenticeship and other things. So they've been innovative in that respect. But I think the need on reliance of actually bringing experts, if we call ourselves experts, but at least a point of view that can bring a strategy forward really crystallizes in this report, because I think you can see the work that's gone on before and people knowing how to work with Welsh Government has brought us to that report.
Yes, you can see it's great that they're kind of bridging that gap between government and industry expertise. That's something that's definitely, it's got to be worked on a lot more. You'll probably see it a lot more in your day-to-day, but there is a huge gap.
I think you're right, Peter. I think the one thing, the real visionary bit that the Welsh Government and the officials have seen, they've broken down the traditional sectors. I don't mean that the traditional sectors are still there, but they understand the merging of the sectors. You can see digital being put in there. You can see business skills in there. You can see manufacturing there. It is not specifically the old traditional CITB construction footprint. So they can see how the interalliance of new strategies, new innovations where you come in, fit in terms of a wider strategy. And, that's always the case. And you can see it in other areas and other governments, it not being the same. So I think that is the bit that, if you're talking about a really fundamental shift and where a momentum has been created, that is it. They've looked beyond sectors, so they haven't gone with off-the-shelf solutions. They've gone, we need to do something different here. We need to promote this. We need to do that. So that is a real innovative approach.
Yeah, and you can see just from the amount of different contributors to this review from different backgrounds, from energy, from wind, from the retrofit sector, there's so much involved, so many different views. Did you come across any? What was your challenge? What was the challenges when there's so many different people contributing in different sectors?
Yeah, it's a good point you raised, Pete. I think the big thing is, and you and me and other people who are listening to this podcast have been on a number of groups. The biggest issue to get a group right is to get that mixed understanding right, the terms of reference right, and more importantly, park your own baggage, and what I mean by that, your own agenda at the door.
Yeah.
And I think what you've got in that group are a number of people who have been down that route a number of times before. And because they were coming in, yes, we've all got our own self-interest and interests that we want to put forward, but that didn't become the focal point. A number of us again on this call, you said, have sat on groups where you've just got loud voices putting what they need to say within that group. But if you look, and the refreshing bit, and that is down, I think, to the way Welsh Government managed it and the ministers, you've got a group of people that have got a lot of self-interest, and I don't mean I'm disrespectful, who've got to, because of their membership and where their members are, did park that at the door and more applied it than forced it. And I think that's why you don't see, and I might be biased here because I was involved in the report, you don't see in that report anything that you can pin down to a certain organisation. Yeah. And I think that's been the art of the actual chairmanship of that group.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what I found. It was really, it covered a lot of different aspects, and it was really informative as a broad, a starting point to access, bridge that gap to government understanding. Just kind of from your point of view and going into this report, what did you expect to find, and was there any differences? Was there bigger gaps there than you actually initially thought?
I don't have any bigger gaps. I went in with the view that because of how new and emerging this sector is, and what I mean by that, it's the merging, as I said, of traditional sectors, but also the technology, the training, the skills needed to be refreshed. I think the big challenges, and to just really answer your question, the one was getting an understanding of what green skills was, sustainability skills, renewable skills, net zero skills were, because the terminology out there is not helpful. Was getting it and cutting it back and saying, what are we on about here? What are we trying to do? The second thing, which wasn't a surprise for me, because you can see the distance that people have to travel here, was the disconnect between employers, government, and education establishments. And what I mean by that was in terms of the qualifications delivered, their own needs, what they were looking at, where does certifications fit in, where does manufacturing training fit in, and I think there was the other thing that was there was obviously the delay in creating something and then getting that in a situation where it can be delivered. Yeah. And the third thing, which wasn't a surprise, but I think I was surprised at perhaps the lack of knowledge to deliver this effectively. We were all going back to type, saying, well, if you take electric sort of side of it, that they were looking at it as the old industry and trying to apply the new skills to it, as opposed to saying, here's the new skills, how does that apply to the old skills? And I was surprised at that. I thought a number of people from outside the group, not necessarily inside the group, would have gone from that point of view and said, this is what we need, this is what we've got, so we need to drive what we need to what we've got, as opposed to putting the other way around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that was the final thing, and it really links to the excellent work that you've done, is there was a reluctance to embrace new technologies and new infrastructure and new products coming on the market. And that's not necessarily against the product. It was more about the risk factor of them pushing a product that may not work in the future. And we've seen what's happened with insulation recently. The governments are very edgy, and I think education staff are very edgy of being put in a situation where they're promoting a training of a product that may in reality not work. And then we're back to, and this is the final point, that was really the key bit here is the actual assessment of the job, the qualifications and the professionalism of people saying, this is what you need and this is why you need it. You know, there are inferences of people that had no knowledge and ever worked in the industry, but were now assessors. And it's those sort of things that need to be looked at. And my final point in this, and it does link to the wider thing, was we are too focused on the number of jobs needed and skills needed, because unless we get the competency right, unless we get the confidence of the industry right to recruit those numbers, it is pointless investing in skills, because the numbers that you were saying we need, and I'm not disagreeing with the numbers are numbers, but unless there is a credibility and a confidence and a capability within the marketplace to take those people on with the right skills and the right positioning and the right competence, we're doing the wrong thing. So the big thing that came out of it is the industry and the development of the SMEs and developing them in the right way and getting their skills and their capability up in terms of procurement and other things to deliver for this was key. And I think that was the interesting bit. I think it moved from skills of individuals and training to, hang on, we've got companies here that need also to be developed, because otherwise we're missing something.
Yeah, that's so interesting when you talk about technology and especially, as you say, with the installation findings that were, you know, sometimes it seems good at the time, but fast forward a couple of years, it's not so good. And that it's all about, when you mention technology there, I guess when I think about technology, I think about communication and, you know, learning from others, and that kind of gap seems to be missing a lot when we look at even with the report you sent to me yesterday about Scotland. You know, Scotland are doing some amazing things in climate change, but what can we learn from?
I think the big thing we can learn, it links again to the installation situation, and links a lot to where new technologies and where green homes, net zero needs to go, is we can't compartmentalize it. So in other words, you can't say this particular product is going to deliver a solution without looking at the whole of the box. And I think that's been the danger in the past. You know, yes, retrofit is important, but retrofit is only part of a solution if we are going to meet net zero homes by 2050. And if we look at realistically, what are we going to do with the houses? And there are houses and there are industrial buildings at the moment that will never be net zero because of the very nature they build, and the techniques we've got are not going to work. And the worst thing we can do is say, well, do this bit. And in actual fact, and I think that's what's happened more insulation than the actual fitting of it, which nobody really covered. I think it was more about the installation be given as a solution without looking at the wider project.
Yeah.
And more than likely, a lot of the issues with the installation is created because there were other remedial work that needed to be done before the installation. And that's what I think we've got to be very careful of. There are people who are going to be pushing their own product without having a wider plan. And I think that's the bit the government's got to grasp.
Yeah, and we see that when, you know, governments push out funding and apprenticeships, when the wider infrastructure isn't really ready for it. You know, there's no employers. Say if you're in rural Wales or rural Scotland, you know, maybe the work isn't there, maybe the employers aren't there to hire.
Yeah, but you know, you look at it and you look at the letters going out, I think yesterday, in terms of the review in England where they want to cut the time for apprenticeships. You know, at the very time where customers like me and you who are going to buy things from the industry are going, what we want is somebody competent. We know they're going to come in, we're going to pay X amount to do it, and they're going to deliver me an excellent service. Well, you're putting people, fast tracking them, which worries the hell out of me, to be totally honest, because it's not going to do the agenda any good, and more importantly, not any good for the client or the individual. And you're not giving them time to do that. And there's no thought of, I can see a marketplace, because it has to be, and you've mentioned it, that, you know, we are already up against the 8 ball. We're already behind the game in terms of where we need to be. And I can see a point of bespoke training, given if they've got the right grounding. So I can see people doing specifically heat pump installations without doing a full apprenticeship, but having the basic knowledge before. And that throws the argument that somebody has got to be capable to assess an individual's prior learning and expertise before they go on courses. The worry is at the moment, and again, this might sound political, that, you know, we've got a lot of NEETs here. Now, what we should be doing, in my opinion, is putting NEETs in a role that they can cope with in terms of where they need to be in a year, 2 years' time as employable, not putting them in big apprenticeships and level 3 apprenticeship, but upskilling the level 2s and others into the level 3s and create that pipeline. You know, we're building expectations here. You will be a brickie in 2 years.
Yeah.
With no skills, you know it, and I know, been around the industry for a long time, they're not going to be at that skill and earning the money that they are saying. Yeah. The same in renewables.
Yeah.
There's a pathway can be created for them to get there, because you can upskill the people there. And it's not mentioned that much, because I believe a lot of the new jobs aren't new jobs. They're upskilling jobs or jobs that are already here. Yeah. Because some jobs will be made redundant, for want of a better word, or at least diminish in importance, and then link them through.
Yeah, and there's you mentioned yesterday too, and it's about the, you know, these facilities with the lecturers. You know, they're not even up to skill yet. You know, it's about training the trainers to, you know, kind of spread that.
I think that you know, and I unfortunately doing some work in this, and it does link, because if you looked at the Welsh report, there is an AI report being done as well. And whichever way you look at it, and there's pros and cons of AI, we all know they're there, and they need to be looked at. But you can see within the next 2 or 3 years, especially in the built environment, AI being a training module, training activity that will be, in a lot of cases, better than what we have. Yeah. After doing lecturers out of jobs, I think there is still the need for a lecturer in person, whether that lecturer is using AI as part of the methodology. But if you look at your product, for example, getting that fitted properly, an AI model might be a very useful tool for you as part of the training mechanics. So I think that is something that needs to be looked at quite significantly, especially for the NEETs, people that need to come into the market. AI could be a very good point. The other thing that we need to capture, there's no two ways about it. I've done a lot of work, and I know I've sent that information to you. I was fortunate to chair the group of the WJC Sustainability and Action Group, which is looking at sustainability qualifications in schools at WJC levels. And there is no doubt, and working with the Future Generations Commissioner, which is unique to Wales, there is no doubt that young people want to look and work in the green sector. I'm calling the green sector wider than construction, but in the green sector. And what we are not doing effectively, in my point of view, is creating the pathways into the sector employment. We say, oh, it's very nice to know about green, but you know, it isn't a job. Yes, it is. Every job, I think, argumentative, even a percentage of, I'm using, I don't like the word green, but I'll use it for best of the graphics, is there will be an element of green in it, whether it's light green or very, very dark green. But everybody who understands sustainability understands the planet, which they have to do now, I think, in any role. Qualifications like that in schools need to be then part of a pathway into apprenticeships, degrees, or wherever people want to go.
Yeah, that's super interesting. That's something that I thought for a long time, that we all know that some kids just don't get on in school. They just don't they can't sit still or whatever it is. They're just not good learners in that format. So I feel like there should be a better pathway for them. You know, when they turn 15, do they stay on this traditional academic learning path, or do they go more towards a trade-based school or green school?
At this point, you make a very good point there, Pete. The point is, I can remember I was fortunate when I was in the training enterprise council, going off the subject, but it might be something that listeners want to look at. Look up Sir Ken Robinson, who is, unfortunately, is now passed away, but was a big advocate. He actually worked with Paul McCartney, Liverpool University, and things like that. But he was an excellent speaker, and there's bits of him on YouTube. But one of the things he was saying was, you can't measure somebody's potential by exams alone. And there are people that have been creative. It's like I use the example of Paul McCartney in school, and the person said, "You never make anything in music." And it's because, but the music was so abstract. And I think what you said there, I think measuring somebody's potential, and either way they go down to grit or they go down a vocational route way, exams may not be the best way. And I think if we get it right, that is one of the models that AI, especially given the COVID generation. Now, let's be honest, how many people who were disengaged from school, not because they have fault, because of COVID, have learned through what we are doing now, through a computer. So I think actually modernizing and perfecting AI models will embrace a number of people that are disengaged going back into school. There's still people learning at home at the moment that could really make an impact and get them into the job market a lot easier than trying to, I wouldn't say force them, but coerce them into going to a college or into a learning environment. So I think we've got to embrace the time we are and what we went through in terms of, we've got a generation now we like to employ that for 2 years didn't really have a school education that we did.
Yeah.
So they were learning like this. So should we now be embracing that and allowing them to learn that way and build, and you can't shortchange competence, you can't build the quality assurance of the system. I'm not talking about in any way watering down the system, but there might be a duality that we need there, because there's a lot of people, I don't think, because of the circumstance they found themselves, would go back into a desk college environment.
Yeah, and I think you touched on a great point there about AI. It's AI is here. You turn on your computer in the morning, it's AI. Everything's going to be AI, and it's only being more and more influenced in everybody's everyday life. And that's kind of, I feel like it's, when you use AI, you're pulling on kind of the same lever. Two sides of the same lever. If you pull on AI, you kind of raise up another part of your brain where you can kind of, maybe work on a bit more and kind of develop a bit more. So I don't feel like we're as such using it as a crutch, but it can help us along the way.
And in one respect, given the economic circumstances, it is cost effective to do. I've been doing some work with Built Energy, or doing a lot of work on onshore wind. Now, you can't really, the cost of actually creating the mechanics to get a course in a college on wind technology is quite astronomical. But using AI and using computer modeling, the same that a local college down in Pembrokeshire have done a lot of work on nuclear and tidal work in terms of using simulation models. I think that is going to be part of a learning. But I do come back to the whole thing. We need to make sure it still delivers quality and competent recruits.
Yeah. And there's I know a friend of mine, he's a CEO of a company that connects government, industry, and education. So it would gather internally all of their data, and then whenever you have a question, you have that data straight away, and because they're all connected, there's no chasing up, there's no delay, and it's so efficient.
I think one of the things that is good, I've seen some AI models, there's a few now really developing this to the point of you checking where your particular learner is, what they've done, what they've passed, what they've done, and what they've engaged with is much better than any teacher or assessor would do.
Yeah.
And that's not against any lecturer or assessor, but the capabilities you can see, if used in the right way, are very, very fundamental. And I think, it's very, very interesting, again, praising what the Welsh government have done. They have linked somebody in who's doing net zero and digital. Which I think is quite innovative in terms of where it is. The person who's doing it understands it as well, which is key. And what I mean by that, sometimes, with all due respect to civil servants, you get a civil servant who is given a role who doesn't grasp what they're doing, but does what they've always done. The person who's got the job here and leads it in Wales understands it and challenges it, which is great from our point of view. So the questions come back, but you think, hang on, this guy really gets this. And I think there's without doubt a role where digital and green will do that at net zero. When that will come and when that goes through, the challenge we have in Wales is, as we have a by-election today, which will be on national news, we have a full election next year, which could change quite the dynamics. Civil servants will stay the same. I would like to think a lot of the work they've already done, because it's a continuation of work they've done over the years, will continue. I think they've got, as you rightly said at the beginning, they've pulled together a very, very strong group of people who, in my opinion, knowing some of them personally as well as their industry connections, won't let it drop.
Yeah.
The key is for anything is what do we do next? And I think I think there needs to be small groups now working against the 10 recommendations there with Welsh Government and education, and plus bringing partners that are not in that group at the moment in terms of particular groups, but looking at perhaps realistically 10 is a lot to try and cover, but perhaps 3 or 4 of the most burning issues that need to be addressed. There needs to be a small little working group in there to help Welsh Government in how they implement it. Because it's all very well, and we've all seen reports. There are plethora of reports, I think, on green and net zero in the last. I think you can pick one up each day if you looked hard enough. But the important thing to me is we've got to stop doing reports and talking at some stage and do something. Yeah. And again, coming back to my past experience with Welsh Government, they have done that in the past. They have done some innovation. The challenge is for it to continue. It's very stop-start, because the way the funding works, you get it for 2 years, then they go, oh, we haven't got funding for it now. We need to move on to something else. So it needs to be a long-term strategy and approach. I understand money's difficult, but I don't think it needs that much new money. It might need transitional money from elsewhere where that needs to become more net zero green. Yeah.
And I think the more immediate kind of signs that you see of climate, the flooding, the longer, wetter winters, it becomes more apparent to government, and they start to see. I know locally we've had floods all of last year. Our whole village was pretty much underwater last year, and that's happening throughout the UK, and it's costly. Some towns are going to be like, they just can't, the council won't be able to afford to keep them.
No, and you've hit the key thing. You think how much expenditure is made to put those right, or do the remedial work, which if we got it right and planned it effectively before and did it and constructed in a way that it was a little bit more protected. If you can't protect 100%, but at least you can do it more protected. That money could have been used elsewhere. I think it's looking at the cause and effect here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there's money wasted, it's money too strong a word, but there's money that is used that could have been saved because of getting it right the first time.
Yeah.
And you look at how much potentially the installation is going to cost. Well, if they'd actually had the right people inspecting those buildings and the competent people doing the job and say, oh no, they weren't chasing the money, for want of a better, we can't put insulation in this building because it's going to mean this, this and this. Yeah. But just putting it in anyway, you think how much money they would have saved if they'd got that point. And what we don't want is 2 things really. One, I said they've got to act quickly, but we don't want a knee-jerk either. We've got to do something quickly without thinking it through. But I think there needs to be, from your point of view, my point of view, being involved in the group, the academic point of view in terms of the planning, the products and the companies involved, there needs to be a timeline that is responsible and meets requirements. And if you're asking me what the next stage is, I think that's what the Welsh Government needs to do with this report. And they also need to pull together either the same people in different respects where they feel their skills and expertise are, and others to help them make that correct.
Yeah, and I think, adopting new technology and communicating and using, whether it's large language models to, communicate between those big entities there'll be less mistakes.
But the other thing, and I say, I've been 30 years in this game in terms of skills and business support in different guises, and I have never seen such a fundamental change in terms of the sectors, the pace of technology. And I think, in fairness, we haven't got any experts anymore. When we've got some change before, you've got people who've gone through it or can add a great value to the discussion. I would say, even with the expertise we had on that group, we're on a learning journey ourselves. And I think that's why it needs to be a small, structured step of moving where things go, because otherwise we'll go down a rabbit hole and find ourselves undoing a lot of the good work that's already been done.
Yeah, yeah. And I just see, when you talk about the 10 recommendations there, what way do you see the government? I know you mentioned that they might take 3 or 4 of them and kind of deal with them first, but how do you see them kind of measuring those or implementing and then measuring?
Yeah, it's a good point, because I think it is the important bit, because you can action it, but you've got to measure the impact of it. My own feeling is the easy ones, if they look at, and it's what we discussed at very early stages in this webinar, is if they look at what are the key elements they need to get right quite quickly in terms of what the industry and what the nation needs. I think if they concentrated on the ones that are the engagement between the education, industry and government, getting the qualifications right, getting the AI models right, if they want to go down that route in terms of digital, looking how sustainability qualifications and things that happen already in schools and green engagement become part of a pathway, that really ticks off about 5 or 6 of the recommendations, because it brings in MEDA, it brings in Welsh Government, brings in the colleges, and they, in one respect, if you look down, and then you can develop programs around that, and they can be quite measurable. So I think doing those, there's a lot, I think, at the moment, will be difficult to measure impact, because the impact will be 5 or 6 years down the line when the work's done. But in terms of quick measurements and showing that they are on the right journey, getting that connectivity, which is not that far away in all honesty, because I'm aware that if you take some of the work that the renewable companies are doing, you do it. Big Energy are working with colleges at the moment in terms of wind turbines and what they need to do, bringing a supply chain there and linking them together. So there's work there, but it's, and I always say this, Ben, and I think it's the best illustration I can give. They are bits of jigsaw that are not fitting in a box at the moment. And what if as far as I'm concerned, a key measurement would be, and would make things happen, if we just could join those bits up and put them in a box, the KPIs and the measurements will come out quite quickly after.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of incidental bits there in terms of developing the colleges to be more effective, looking at where the centres of excellence in some areas might be a way that they lead others. There are approaches there, but there's major infrastructure with new technologies needed we have never even grasped before. And if we don't get the learning and the employment engagement right, they're not going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's and you mentioned MEDA and the different kind of stakeholders there, and it's all about I guess how often would they meet, between, so you have MEDA and then you have the different, like, the skills partnerships.
Yeah, not that often. At the moment, it's more than like, because MEDA is a new kid on the block, and in fairness to them, they've got to find their feet, they've got to find their more than likely positioning within a Welsh Government Regional Skills Partnership and City Deals and everything else within that environment. To be honest, I don't see that real relationship coming much before March of next year, and that's because they're doing reviews. They are trying to really look at what they've inherited, look at what they've got, and what they need to do. So in one respect, I think that is where it is. But if you look at that green energy paper linked to the digital side, there could be pilots, and I hate using the word pilots, and I hate doing pilots, but in some respects, if they're done effectively, it can be very, very meaningful. If we looked at the particular recommendations there and use those as pilots, so that MEDA AI and other things could be brought in, and the research partnerships could be brought in terms of regional projects, you could have a model there that they could try and see how it works, adapt, and then actually use it as an exemplar. It's not going to be perfect because, as I said, we're all on a learning journey. There's going to be, I wouldn't say mistakes made, but learning elements being brought in that we need to look at within that. But I think knowing some of the officials within MEDA, Welsh Government, and other people that are leading on technologies within Wales, if there was the right forum, there is definitely a capability to build pilots that will then link to give wider KPIs and measurements as they progress even further with wider strategies.
Yeah, that's interesting. And kind of like when we look at like our neighbours up in Scotland, you know, they're spending huge amount of money. I think almost 90 billion over the next 10 years, with, you know, a spread over kind of 5 different categories. You know, agriculture, retrofit, wind energy, that kind of stuff. Which I was surprised to see that the wind energy was over 60% of that budget, which I thought was a lot. You know, when you think that's just one of the 5. So where do you think, like a broad estimate, how much do you think something like this would cost in Wales for investment?
It's hard one to gauge, to be honest with you, in terms of cost. You know, and you've got to look at government budgets are tight. Let's be brutally frank. So I'd be loath to put a figure on it, but I think the way I would look at it, there needs to be a review of the current funding in terms of skills and training. How effective it is, what's it doing, is it doing what it needs to do? And I think there is elements there will be savings that could be re-embraced elsewhere in that initiative. We've got to look at, and Wales hasn't adopted the same approach as England regarding the skills and apprenticeship levy. If the levy is a policy is going to be proceeded with and looks like in England, we have to look at it how it's used more effectively in Wales in terms of skills and training. At the moment, it goes in the Barnett formula and can be differentiated into anything in terms of where it is. But I think that might need to have an element that comes back to skills and training. The other thing that we've got to look at, if you look at the big infrastructure project, I think it's something Scotland have done very, very well, is you have got major contractors coming in there in terms of wanting to build it. And they will have to, through procurement and social clauses and the need to build it, to develop skills. They will have an investment to make.
Yeah.
But it's how we make that investment part of the wider pot,
right,
and link it in. So in one respect, I think, given everything else we can pull in, the funding is there, but it's not in a central funding pot. So you've got a number of people who are prepared to put money in, but it's back to the point that you raised very, very effectively in the very beginning, is for people to invest in, especially industry and especially clients, they've got to see and they've got to be part of that solution and think that solution is going to work. So we come back to, you've got to get the model right. And so it's a bit like a Kevin Costner film, if you build it, they will come. And basically, if you build that model right, they will invest in it. And if they feel part of it, what they can't be, and the governments have done it in the past, is told what they need to do. No, you're part of this process. It might not be all what you want, but at least you feel, I've contributed this bit. And you can see where that's happening now, that some of the organizations that are doing that very, very effectively, you can see a different relationship building. And I think I don't really see the need for, beyond central pot money, if that's used effectively, more investment needed in Wales and Scotland. I can see that, you come back to the old thing about, should we all have retrofit centres? Should every college in Wales have it? No, it shouldn't. What it should have is certain colleges leading on certain elements of retrofit and others doing other bits where the economic need is. If you take wind turbines and everything else, there'll be certain areas where that investment's happening. So the core knowledge base should be there. But in the past, we've just given it carte blanche, and you've got colleges, because where they're based, not able to recruit any students because the work is 60, 70 miles down the road. So I think it's more about not everybody doing everything, but leading very, very effectively on areas where they can. And some of the colleges, I know NPTC Group is one, Llandrillo Menna is another, College Cigar is one, Cardiff and the Vale have done that very, very effectively. There are others, but those are ones that have looked at where the industry needs and have developed programs and partnerships alongside it.
Yeah. So this kind of leads me kind of to almost to my last question, but it leads nicely into it. So if you had carte blanche, all the resources you needed, all the money that you needed, what would be the first thing that you would change or look at to review?
First thing I would change is making the system slicker in terms of application process and getting the money out there and getting the biggest frustration at the moment, you can see it even with this report. You get reports and it's 18 months before implementation. I'm not saying rushing things, but at least getting some activity on the ground quite quickly. So what I would change is making a process that is robust but slicker. Yeah. So if we say to do something, all right, there are issues outside that prevent some things happening quickly, but there are things that I think that can be unblocked quite quickly and can be delivered quite quickly. And that is, if we get back to the partnership we said about industry, colleges, government working well together, you can at least release some of those initiatives quite quickly, in my opinion.
Yeah, agreed. That's great one. If there's anything that you want to add to our conversation?
No, I think the big thing is we've got a lot of innovation across the UK and a lot of people doing some excellent work in renewable technologies and the green agenda. We need to ensure we embrace that and capture that effectively, because I think in some cases, some of the barriers that innovation and the companies that develop innovation have to go through isn't helping the UK. It's perhaps we do look at more, and we were years and years ago, a country of innovation, and I think we still are that, but we seem to have lost our way how we bring that innovation into the wider field in terms of supporting it, investing in it, and making it, in one respect, part of the way we do business. So I think my key thing would be we need to invite everybody who's showing innovation within the circle of innovation and the circle of development within the UK, making sure that we capture the best innovations and develop them effectively. Because that's the only way we're going to do it. Because the bottom line is, and I've said this a number of times here, we're on a learning curve in renewable and net zero. The solutions, some of them haven't even been thought of yet. The products haven't been thought of yet. They will as things emerge and as different technologies come forward. You can see that in other innovations. You take health in terms of innovations, in terms of cures of diseases now, where they are going. We need that same within the green technology. And I think we've got the opportunity to do that, but we haven't got the system or the mechanisms to do that effectively. And if we can do that, that would be a nice thing to be able to retire and play golf on.
Yeah. Well, let's hope we can get you to that golf range as soon as possible.
Yeah, if you get me on the green, that's fine.
That's great. Well, thanks so much for taking part in this. It's been really great to have you, and it's great to have your expertise and your knowledge.
Really appreciate the opportunity, Peter, and wish you and the company all the best as well, and this innovation series.